Hello everybody and welcome back to Final Score Overtime 2021 edition, of course, on a contingent football season, of course, but we're bringing to you the high school, college, and NFL football. All the news coming your way. And let's toss it over to our other desk. I know we at Big 2 are going to practice some very safe social distancing, so we have our sports reporters, Ben Peck and Aaron Reynolds, over there on the main desk today. How are you guys doing?
Feeling good. Feel important on this main desk.
Yes.
Liking it? I'm glad.
So.
I know you guys only usually get up there during football season, so it's nice to have you guys.
It's usually for the real deal.
All right, you guys, let's dive right into it. We're going to start by talking about the UIL rule changes this year. Specifically, let's start by talking about the streaming rules. What do you guys have an understanding about what the UIL is going to allow stations like us to do for this year?
Well, so obviously there's usually the rule of no live TV broadcasts on Friday nights to encourage in-person attendance. But with attendance up in the air, they've lifted that rule for this year. I believe, too, I'm not as sure of this, but I think online broadcast had to be an hour behind as well. So I think those can be up to the minute. Even if attendance is permitted, I think certainly the idea being to give people who maybe can and are allowed to go see these games who don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, maybe you got some, especially some older family members, give them a chance to see some stuff, so potentially a lot more access to things. And I don't know, it's everyone, the general pulse I've seen is kind of unanimously like this makes sense for this year. Obviously, I think, attendance is okay. I think obviously schools would like to get as much of that as possible, but more than anything, I think this is probably the only logical thing to do at this point.
I think this creates a lot of really good opportunities for these high schools in the area, especially the smaller high schools that don't really see a high attendance anyway. I mean, especially if it's a game of the week, here at Big 2, we will be able to, maybe stream that game and give those teams a little bit more coverage than they normally would get. I think that would be, a really positive thing, especially for six-man teams out here in West Texas.
For sure. Yeah, and you guys both touched on this, even if fans are allowed at the games, not everybody is necessarily going to be comfortable going to those games. And the last thing I think UIL would want to do is rob those fans of the opportunity to see their sons play football.
And I'm not sure either, but I would imagine, I don't know if anything specifically has come out, I haven't seen it, but for playoffs, the playoffs is a little interesting because my understanding is Fox Sports, through Fox Sports Southwest, they sort of have the say-so, they kind of get first dibs, so to speak, on different playoff games. But if playoff game attendance is limited, I think that could also be obviously a very huge deal to give people access to, because it's one thing, maybe you say 50% capacity for regular season game that people really want to go to, but they can't. But if you're having to turn away people from a potential playoff game, that could obviously be huge in terms of access for that.
Yeah, and I think this idea of broadcasting for the UIL this season might prove to be a model for the next few years as well, because TAPS already does it. They live stream nearly all of their games, and they have it available on an app. So for those fans who aren't even around a TV or around a computer, you could potentially even download it onto your app, and it might be a way for not only journalists or broadcast companies to make a little bit of money through advertising revenue, but also
and the schools through the rights. Yeah, absolutely. Schools have, just like all the conferences in college football, they have rights to sell, so to speak. So it is interesting too if maybe some schools have attendance. If they're able to open up and they don't drop off that much, but they still have this option, maybe, like you said, those concerns are maybe not as warranted as maybe feared, and maybe look at things for the upcoming years, at least online.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Ben, have you heard anything about stadium attendance? I know they haven't really come out with anything officially yet, but I mean, you're more plugged into this than I am. Do you know anything about if they're going to limit capacity like they were talking about for college football and the NFL, at 50% or whatever it was?
Yeah, so I mean, 50% is kind of, I think, the threshold that has been allowed by Governor Abbott on the statewide level. And so presumably that would be applied for high school. As of now, it's one of those things that it's kind of in flux, obviously, and it's one that I always say everything, because people ask, like, what's going on? I always say everything's going according to plan until you hear something else, which, at certain points, hearing something else seems more likely than not at some point, but when you will hear that is a little unclear. But as far as attendance goes, I think the biggest thing you're noticing, we saw it with ECISD and Midland ISD, is season ticket sales not going forward with that. Both of those school districts are just going to be going week by week basis. Obviously, I don't think they want to sell tickets to people who potentially they have to come back and say, actually, you know, you can't come to the games, or we have to have limited capacity, or maybe it's a certain type of family or something who can go. So really the biggest tangible impact right now, I think, is the season ticket sales, that schools districts, a lot of them are not doing them, and they're just going week by week. But as far as like actual capacity that's going to be allowed at this point, it still feels like a wait and see. I would imagine right now, you know, if nothing changes, it seems like 50% would be the highest it could go. And I think kind of until we hear otherwise, it's probably a safe assumption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, we'd hope they'd at least give some kind of precedent to the people who have been stadium or season ticket holders for however long.
I know, at least I think for ECI, I don't want to, for one of those, I think they're kind of giving some of those season ticket holders preferential.
They can get the general admission tickets. I know
earlier.
ECISD earlier.
Yes.
Than anyone
I
else.
think that's a common
and
theme.
I
That's
think
what
they
I've
have
seen.
the right to claim those same season tickets the next year.
Yes.
So I think they just roll over.
Yes, I think
Got
that's
it.
true.
Well, you know who else this might also potentially benefit, this new streaming rule, is actually Jake and me, because there's rumors going around that there could be calling of the games this year for Big Two to have the Jake and Jake show. That
Jake
would be
and Jake.
Rumors or wishful thinking?
And rumors,
By the
wishful
way-
thinking, same difference.
Week 1, I mean, you know, we're not announcing anything, but there's a lot of potential great game of the week opportunities. So
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there. You got
very exciting stuff in the works. So let's go now. We're talking about the games. Let's switch over to the practices, some of which have already been going on. And now, Aaron, I know that you've been at these practices at a few schools. Talk about what it's looked like. What's been different?
Yeah, so most of the schools, right upon entry to the practice facilities, well, wait, let me back up. A lot of the schools now have way more hours to go, way more schedules to go in and get your workouts in. So instead of having just 3 sessions, it might be broken up into 6 sessions now, so that you can encourage social distancing a little better. And then most of the schools also, you have to get your temperature checked right when you walk in the door. So I can't tell you how many practices I went to where I had to get my temperature checked before I could go cover whatever they were doing.
So
and
far,
then,
so good?
Yeah, yes, so far so good. And then of course, after every workout, kids and coaches are disinfecting whatever equipment they've used. A lot of them are really utilizing their practice facilities just to kind of space out. So you'll have one group of varsity doing agility work while the other is lifting weights. And actually, when I went to Odessa High a couple of weeks ago, and this is a couple of weeks after they had that positive COVID case, so everyone had to quarantine for 2 weeks. They came back and they were split up into groups of 4 or 5. So
Wow.
they'd taken it to the extreme.
That's a
in
big
their
school
stations.
for groups of 4 or 5.
Yes. Yeah. So they were spread out all over the place. But yeah, from what I can see, I think most schools are taking it really seriously.
I'll say too, obviously Odessa High had this, and then it became mandated. Of course, you have to wear a mask when you're not actively exercising for all these students at the strength and conditioning workouts. And yeah, it's definitely, I think added flexibility is probably the biggest thing I've noticed. Trend.
Aaron, you talked to the head coach of OHS, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. So I talked to Coach Servance, and he said kind of right now their motto is just kind of like take it one day at a time. They've just kind of tried to overcome and get used to this new normal. But I actually talked to the Garden City coach as well about what he thinks about this new normal for teams, and here's what he had to say. So basically just kind of going around, just seeing how programs are kind of, you know, still doing summer workouts amidst the coronavirus pandemic. So I know there are some steps that the UIL has made you guys take, but what are some of the things that you're doing just to keep your kids safe and kind of healthy during this time?
Well, we're really trying to make sure we stay distant away from each other and disinfecting every chance we get. Every piece of equipment we use, we're trying to disinfect. But other than that, we were really happy to just be back here. And so were the kids. They were going crazy, probably driving their parents crazy. So it was time for them to get back to work. And we've had some good numbers so far. But you know, in the back of our minds, we're still want to keep the kids safe and you know, make sure that there's no virus around, or
Sure.
we're doing our part to keep it under, you know, in a bubble.
Yeah, and you mentioned the kids, but how excited were you to get back out here with the guys working out?
Very excited. You know, we especially just the sports skills specific workouts alone. We're just going to be so inexperienced. We lost a lot to graduation in football and basketball, so we're going to have we needed time to get on the football field, need time to get in the gym. And so that was bigger than just them getting in the weight room, which is big too, but we were really happy to get started with the skill sessions.
Sure. And then what do you think about how the UIL has kind of handled the whole situation? You know, obviously they postponed everything for a long time, canceled school and all that stuff, but other than that, what do you think about the steps that they're making?
I think they were doing their due diligence, and I was happy with that. I know that they're looking out for our kids' best interests as well. I know that they miss sports and miss the spring season more than anybody. So I know they had to make some very hard decisions. I'm happy with the way it's gone. I'm happy with the progress we've made so far, and you know, I'm hoping everybody just stays safe so we can get to the fun part starting in August.
Yeah, and I saw the guys disinfecting their equipment between each set, but how have they kind of reacted to all of the new implements you guys have to make?
They're not quite used to it, so it took you know, that first week we're like, hey, grab the spray, you know, but they're doing a good job. They know how important this is, and they know we need to do our part so that everybody will have a chance to get back to normal.
Okay.
Coach Jones, thank you so much for giving us your time today on Final Score Overtime. Aaron also got to catch up with the head coach of Seminole. Here's Coach Palmer about the steps that they are taking.
You know, the biggest deal is the check-in procedures. You know, we had the pre-screening sheets that they all had to fill out with their parents, basically stating they hadn't been exposed to anything or had any symptoms or any of that. And then the check-in temperature every day before they come in the door. You know, we've got the tape lines out there and they line up, and just like you had to do at Walmart or whatever when all this started, and taking their temperature and all that. I never thought there'd be a day where we had to check their temperature, you know, and here we are. You know, we had to buy thermometers and hand sanitizer out the wazoo, and it's just crazy, sanitizing the weight room between every lifter and sanitizing the rack between each group, and every time a kid touches a bar. And it's, you know, it's what we got to do to be able to play in the fall and play by the rules if we're going to get to play. And so it's what's best for the kids. It's just kind of a learning curve, an adventure for all of us, you know.
It's obviously a little bit of extra work that you guys have to do, but does it feel any different, you know, with the having kids in here at all?
I mean, it's extra work. It's a little bit different, you know, as far as what normal has been. But just to get them back in the building and be able to work with our kids again is, you know, when we had that we hosted a track meet right before school got out, you know, and that was when they started canceling the tournaments and all of that stuff, and we were wondering if we were going to get to host our track meet, you know, and we did, and little did we know that was the end of the school year, you know. And so they've been off since May or March 12th, and so it's been an adventure. It's just glad to have them back in the building and be able to work with them again.
You kind of feel like they're excited to be back as well, to get some.
Yeah, the old absence makes the heart grow fonder, you know. I think them being off, we've had a huge turnout. You know, we had almost 150 kids yesterday. And so hopefully we're on pace for that. Again, we run about 5 different sessions throughout the day just to keep the numbers in capacity, you know, because you're at 25% capacity, and when you got a building, that's great, but 6 foot between every kid, it fills the building up really fast. And so we've had to move weight rooms into a turf room to make them socially distanced and to do all that and just get them here. And then they're just excited because it's almost like starting over for them, you know. It's new to them because they've had basically 2 months off. You know, we sent home workouts and all kinds of Zoom meetings just like everybody else, but I'm not naive, you know. It's different being in the building with them, and they're excited, so it makes us excited.
Yeah, have you been, I guess, have the guys come back somewhat in shape or a little less in shape than you would have expected?
They're not as out of shape as we thought, you know. That's what we were just talking about earlier. They look good physically, and, you know, time off, as a football coach, I may get blasted for admitting this, but time off is not always a bad thing for them. And so any little nagging thing, they get to get over it and get healthy. And so we've got a few kids that were banged up in the spring that are not now, and so they're able to run and go at full speed. Now they're sore as heck today after yesterday, and it's like 2-a-days. You know, you got to build into this thing, and we've backed our percentages way off and our rep loads and everything else, just trying to take care of them.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned over the phone that you have them broken up into a few groups, I guess. Is that just to kind of implement a little bit more social distancing since you can't have so many people in the building at the same time?
Yeah, last year and years past we've run like a morning session and then a junior high session and then an afternoon session. Well, now we've got 4 morning sessions and 2 in the afternoon, just to, because you've got to rotate your group with a coach, because if somebody, God forbid, somebody come in and tested positive or had a fever or whatever, that whole group is now quarantined. And so to try to keep those groups small enough and manageable, for the weight room and the capacity of your building, we've got to run so many sessions because you can't mix your groups, and so you've got to, it creates a logistical nightmare, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. And thank you, Coach Palmer, for that. Of course, as of last week, we have some new regulations to deal with. A lot of schools took last week off following the 4th of July holiday just to limit exposure and spreading COVID-19. So a lot of them came back this Monday, and they came back to some new procedures from the UIL. As of this past Monday, athletes are now allowed to go into showers and they're allowed to use their locker rooms, but they must also wear a face mask, which comes after Governor Abbott's mandate, of course. So everyone must wear a face mask upon entering any athletic facilities, and they also are supposed to wear them while they're not actively exercising. And I actually just ran through the newsroom with my mask on, and it's very tiring if you try to do otherwise.
I can attest. So I'm sorry, just to clarify, they have to shower with masks on.
Well, I don't know if they're actually using the showers.
I think they have access.
They can use them if they want
I'm
to.
assuming
Just
they
go
probably don't have to shower with the mask.
Okay, I don't know if you knew what the rule was. I just couldn't imagine having to do that.
I'm gonna leave you with that question,
That'd
Jake.
be tough. Oh man.
And so, obviously just addressing the elephant in the room, of course we're going to talk about, college football as well. Some conferences, not even just schools, already saying that they will not play this season. Ben, I'll start with you. What do we feel? What is the general consensus about the 2021 high school football season so far in Texas?
So I think as far as anyone following this and things to look for, I know there was a deal with the Dallas ISD superintendent about a week ago who said he didn't think high school football would happen at all. That caused a lot of frenzy on social media, and but I would say, there's 2 ways to go about this. UIL and TEA, I think if you hear something from them, obviously take that very seriously. Aside from that, we've seen a lot of independent school districts coming out and not just speculating as this Dallas ISD superintendent did, but actually taking actionable steps. So actually the biggest one for our area, El Paso ISD, is suspending all in-person learning until September 7th, and until then they will not have athletics. So there's a few schools that have an El Paso ISD, or I think it's El Paso County, so even I think there's some other school districts in there.
Is it Americas that canceled?
El Paso
they canceled
Americas,
their
I think they were set to play Midland Christian. El Paso Pebble Hills was getting ready to play Permian. I think Midland High had an El Paso opponent week 1. So there's a few schools who could be impacted by that. And then there's other, Hidalgo down in the valley is done through September 27th. Travis County, I think, is in Austin, obviously a lot of state contenders there. They're, I think, shutting down per city order through September 7th. So that's kind of early season non-district games, and I think obviously if you had to go without those, you could still essentially just treat those as open weeks. So I think that's actionable step that we're noticing now. Coach McWilliams just posted something on Twitter
From Big Spring.
From Big Spring. He says, as per a UIL conference call, UIL will likely come out with a statement on Monday in regards to various things. Obviously, if we hear something from Governor Abbott in terms of how to handle the rising caseload in Texas, I think UIL, as we saw in the spring, if you remember, they didn't really shut things down until Governor Abbott came out and kind of mandated. I think it was when he said the kids had to do the schools from home the rest of the year, and then UIL came out, if my memory serves me right, and then said we can't have athletics for the rest of the year.
So they'll kind of follow his guidance.
Yeah, so I think if you hear something from Abbott, then check on UIL, see what they're doing. As of now, of course, nothing official from UIL, but potentially soon.
Yeah, and Jake, both of you guys work in news, so you deal with the number of COVID cases in Texas and specifically in our area all the time. So can you guys kind of talk to us about how it's affecting the Permian Basin in general?
I mean, just recently we've seen just a spike in cases. I think, we've had 1,000 over at least over the past 2 weeks, just in the Permian Basin of confirmed cases. Midland and Odessa are both considered hot zones, so that's very scary. That means over 10% of tests done are coming back positive. Not 10% of people, 10% of tests done. And so we're at like 14% right now, which is well over that 10% threshold. And if things like this hold, I find it really hard to believe that the state government and local government and even the federal government maybe at some point won't take action to limit mainly football game. I mean, because high school football is such a big thing. It's such a passionate thing around here. I mean, Ratliff is full every week for the Panthers or OHS. Grande's always full for Lee and MHS. Like, it's a big deal out here, and I mean, college football is a big deal where I'm from. That stadium fills up every single week. It's going to be tough if we keep seeing this dramatic of a case rise. I know doctors at ORMC and MCH, they're very concerned about what their bed capacity can look like, what their staff is looking at like right now, and I feel like if we have these huge events, when there's 20,000 people in Ratliff, that's going to cause spikes and that's going to cause unneeded stress on our doctors.
Yes.
I think the best way to do this moving forward, if you want to have a season, wear a mask, social distance, protect yourself, number one, protect the people around you. If you don't do it, we won't get to have football, and that's such an important thing to this community. And I think that's, if you're going to look at it one way, think, do I want to be a part of this again this fall? And, take the steps to be a part of that again. And then, I think they need to start looking at just limiting stadium capacity. I know it won't feel the same in, a quarter full Ratliff, but 5,000 fans is better than no fans. So that's my opinion on it.
And, even building on that, football with no fans is better than no football at all. For me, the scariest thing has been, I don't have the number offhand, but there is truth to an increase of deaths over the past few weeks in the area. I think, we had single digits throughout, from, February to March to now, and then I think every day now, at least in both Midland and Odessa, we're getting at least one or two. That to me, of course, is the concern, not even just the health of the kids. Of course, we're reading about how coronavirus can affect the body in so many ways and how it leaves effects on the body in so many ways. Of course, we've read of how, the age gap between people who actually experience symptoms. Not necessarily, I'm not saying I'm not worried about the kids' health. I'm worried about the kids who will be participating in these games, going home to their families and spreading it amongst their families. Yeah. Exactly. To me, that's the biggest concern. And Aaron, one last thing before we go. I know obviously you've been at these practices, and not even so much of optimism of the season, just because of course they are practicing, but what have you at least taken away of their realistic chances of a season happening? What do the coaches feel about it?
Yeah, obviously they're kind of like us, like they just really don't know, but they're trying to take every preventative measure that they can so that we can have a football season. I think that's why whenever a school or an area has a positive case, they're so quick to shut things down and to quarantine for a couple of weeks. And prior to even going into workouts, you have to sign a waiver saying that you aren't showing any symptoms or that you haven't been around anyone who has the virus. So I think they're hopeful for the most part from what I've heard, but I think they're just kind of like us, just hoping for the best.
Mm-hmm. I think the last thing I'll do to tie a bow on this, at least for me, with high school, I was going to mention, of course, New Mexico. We have a few of those schools. They postponed all football and soccer from the fall to the spring. So we've already seen that action taken with our neighbor to the west. And then I was just going to say, too, I know it's a football show, but we should point out high school, there's cross country in the fall as well, kind of in this early stretch. But high school volleyball, they actually start playing games way before football. They start, I believe their first games are very middle of
early
August.
August.
It's early August. But it's interesting because football is obviously contact sport. Volleyball, there's a little more distance between teams, although obviously you get kind of close at the net. But that's indoor. It sounds like from what we're hearing, indoor is a little easier to spread than outdoor. So there's a lot of conversation about maybe pushing football back maybe a couple weeks if you have to, as we're seeing with college football and everything. But just it's so easy to focus on football as like the center of the athletic calendar, but those athletes could also be affected. So I just want to point that out.
Mm-hmm. And Jake said it best. The best thing we can do to make sure we have a football season: wear a mask. I saw a study. If everybody in Texas wore masks for 8 weeks, every county hospital would be completely under control. And that's going to wrap it up for our high school talk. Coming up, we're going to be talking about how college football has already been affected. Some of the big names declaring they will not play. Find out who that's going to affect.
All right, thanks for staying with us, everybody. Now we're going to turn our attention to college football
Let's go.
and some of the repercussions that the coronavirus has had on it. And I'm going to hand it over to Jake Meyer now to kind of break down what's going on at the Division I level.
Our Big Ten correspondent.
All right, getting right into the Big Ten. That's my conference. Go Big Red. So, first off, the Big Ten announced just recently that they will not be playing any non-conference games. They told the staff and everyone else that it was because they wanted to limit contact with schools they couldn't control. So, like, within Big Ten schools, I know there was a lot of debate about it because Penn State has to travel to Nebraska. Like, that's such a far, why can't we just play these?
Ohio State can't play Bowling Green. I saw that one.
Yeah. Well, like, Rutgers traveling to, Iowa or something like that. Like, that's such a long trip. The reason they're going about it this way is because they can control what those schools do. They cannot say, hey, Central Michigan, yeah, you can't play Michigan this year, but they can't control what Central Michigan does. Mm-hmm. They can't control what safety measures the MAC takes. They can't control those teams. They want to be able to have control and know exactly what procedures are in place so that their athletes stay safe. I think that's the biggest thing. The questions that come around with this, since every other conference has not dropped down to a conference-only schedule, is how is this going to affect the playoff and how does this affect bowl eligibility? I know, at least me as a Nebraska fan, I was chalking up Central Michigan, South Dakota State as wins that we desperately need in our schedule so that we can get bowl eligible. Cincinnati we would have lost to, so thank God we're not playing them. Yeah. But I wonder how this is going to affect bowl eligibility, and then also for teams like Ohio State or Penn State, who are really talented teams, if they go, they're dropping it down to 9 games. They've talked about moving it up to 10. The Nebraska athletic director wants to play 12 conference games, which would be that would be tough. But they're looking to make it 10 games, maybe keep it at 9. But how do you compare a 9-win, Ohio State, who, they ran through the Big Ten Conference, won the Big Ten title, they're 10-0, but they've only played Big Ten teams. You don't have that measuring stick with other, with Wisconsin playing, whoever, or they were supposed to play, Ohio State was supposed to play Oregon this year.
Yes.
Like, that would have been a great measuring stick, just, that's what those non-conference games do for those rankings.
Mm-hmm. It helps measure conference strength against
against other conferences. Yes. So how are you going to be able to measure that going into this year? I think that's a big question.
The short answer is you can't. You've made it apples and oranges.
Yeah.
I don't understand what you do with the thing like the playoff. I don't understand how you rank the top 4 teams. If you have 5 undefeated teams from the Power 5 conferences, who gets left out?
Yeah.
You can't make the strength of schedule debate really this year because
they all play a conference schedule.
That's exactly. That's all that they would have. So how are you going to knock that against? How are you going to knock them for that? How are you going to prop them up for that? This is
Alabama USC, one of those big non-conference games that's been canceled. The Pac-12 gone. conference.
I forgot that got canceled. Oh man, that's disappointing. I was so excited for that game too.
Yep.
The first few weeks of the year are always, the Jerry World, all those showcase games, what they call, where
especially
you
in
pick
the playoff
top
era.
three. Yes, and like you're saying, that's directly related to measuring the SEC versus the Pac-12, the Big 12 versus the Big 10, any other conference that you would need to actually pin against each other when it matters. This is how you really get to see it, is when you take the best of the best and you let them play and see who wins.
Well, and that we're going to get into Notre Dame now. I know that's a little bit farther down. Notre Dame might have to be the measuring stick for the conferences this year if we do that. So
Yeah.
I know Notre Dame plays a lot of Big Ten teams, a lot of ACC teams, and a lot of Pac-12 teams. And I think the ACC kind of has, with basketball, Notre Dame plays with the ACC. So I think the ACC has kind of extended, that olive branch
As
to say
our
you can come play
ACC
with us.
correspondent, I know ACC has sort of brought in Notre Dame in, and they've kind of actually developed even before COVID, like an ACC heavy schedule. They've worked with them to schedule an ACC heavy football schedule because they do want to, obviously they're not going to take them into the conference. Notre Dame doesn't want to do that.
Notre Dame doesn't want to.
There is that relationship there outstanding.
I think if the major conferences if the Pac-12, Big Ten, all these, the ACC can kind of strike a deal where it's like, hey, we're canceling all of our games that are non-conference except Notre Dame. Except Notre Dame, we'll play Notre Dame, and that'll be the measuring stick across the board, at least for those three conferences. I think that kind of get how bad did Michigan beat Notre Dame? Oh, how bad did USC beat Notre Dame? I'm cheering for Notre Dame to lose all those games.
I understand.
Yeah, because I don't like them. But I think that's how you have to do this. You have to. It's tough. And I mean, you look at a team like BYU and Army, and I mean New Mexico State, but they're not in the national conversation. But BYU, they could be another measuring stick team if they could figure out a way to make this work. It would take a lot of not negotiation, but a lot of compliance between these conferences and them saying we really want to have football, we really want to have these measuring sticks available. I think it's interesting, to say the least.
I don't mean to strike you down, but it's just wishful thinking. I mean, we just talked about how Ohio State can't play Bowling Green within the same state lines, but we're going to send, I don't know the schedule off the top of my head, but we're going to send kids from Rutgers who live in the state of New York to other states in the Midwest, or vice versa. How are we doing this? We're doing this in the name of COVID-19 to try and protect people. How much are we protecting people?
Especially if you start making exceptions to the. And I mean, that was just kind of me going on a rant, but I just
because it's what we all want to happen.
Yeah.
We want. I mean, I know you don't want Notre Dame to win, but could you imagine a college football season without Notre Dame being involved because they're an independent school?
It's not. It's not realistic.
It's not.
That's a blue blood program. That's a program that, even though I hate them, I tune in to watch because it's Notre Dame.
Guys, and kind of piggybacking off of your concerns there, the Ivy League has already canceled its football season, and they were the first league to do so.
Yeah, they took the lead with basketball. Yeah, Big Ten took the lead.
Do you guys think that this could be a theme, I guess, for the rest of the conferences?
I'm worried with, because the big thing with the people pointed out with the Ivy League is the Ivy League, unlike these major conferences, does not have the same financial. Football, I'm sure, is a big revenue maker for them relative to the Ivy League, but the Ivy League in general is not. You're not talking about the scale of revenue that you're talking about with these major conferences. And if people are saying, well, it makes sense for them. We've already seen junior college push back to the spring. You worry about conferences and schools like UTPB and the Lone Star Conference. I'm sure they still need football to help support their programs. UTPB needs all the help they can get in general. I mean, they've been trying to just fill their scholarship allotment, even with their football program. So it is kind of scary to think what this could hold for some of those smaller schools.
And one thing, just building off, not to take away from the smaller schools, but some schools had, or at least I don't even know if schools, they're talking about moving, fall sports to the spring. Obviously, if football were to be played in the spring, would those kids who are going to get drafted in April want to play those games in whatever month that they would hypothetically play in? It just seems it's a tough situation all around. But going back to the lower division schools, do we feel You guys are the ones who are more plugged in. Do you guys feel like they would follow the steps of maybe the Ivy League, Pac-12?
Well,
big.
The National Junior College Athletic Association has already moved football to the spring. They've moved all of their close contact sports from the fall to the spring. Basketball's not going to start till January. Track's not going to start till March.
Volleyball too, right?
Yeah, close contact sports. Baseball and softball should still be on time, but yeah, at the lowest level, we have already moved football to the spring.
Yeah, and I think as far as UTPB, I think they generally kind of follow the Lone Star Conference lead. So if you're checking for updates with that, I would look for the Lone Star Conference. But I don't know. I'm sure nervous times trying to do all that budgeting.
I feel for these small schools, especially for the athletic programs that are not football, because football is such a huge revenue generator, especially comparatively for all of these schools, and like they're what's there to keep bowling and all these other athletic events that give kids scholarships and give kids these opportunities to go to college and compete at a high level and really show their talents. Football is a huge part in paying for all of that. And without football, I mean, how many sports are going to get cut? How many kids are not going to be able to compete at the next level who really deserve to compete at the next level? Because there's so many talented high school kids that deserve to go on and continue their athletic careers, especially at these lower divisions. And without football at least funding part of that, you're going to have to start canceling things like that, and that's just a sad thing. I mean,
Stanford,
your question of
11
how many
of their teams.
Go ahead.
Stanford. They canceled 11 of their teams. It's one of the biggest budget athletic programs out there.
Yeah. And your question, how many? I think the answer is going to be very scary. Talking about how many kids are going to be robbed of opportunities because of this virus. That's going to wrap up our college football segment. Coming up in the NFL, we got more COVID news, of course, and as well as some actual tangible numbers that players have been released through EA Madden. We debate coming up next. And welcome back to this first edition of the Next Year Coming Up Final Score Overtime. We're going to jump into our NFL news now, guys. We got to address the elephant in the room. The football franchise in Washington is finally going to change their name after some serious corporate pressure from the partners, FedEx, Nike, a few others who,
Amazon pulled their products too.
Threatening to hurt Dan Snyder's pockets, basically forcing his hand into this name change. How do we feel about this?
Well, I think it is definitely interesting the forces, the parties at play, as you mentioned, because Dan Snyder was very steadfast, even because there's been calls to change the name for a long time, and he's been very adamant that it was not going to happen. It is kind of just from a no matter how you feel about the name, it is kind of just from a societal standpoint interesting to see how quickly things have changed, the new environment things are in, to see something as steadfast against change just in the course of 2 months.
$1 billion over that.
Completely flip.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that, I feel like Native Americans especially, have been protesting the name for quite some time, but when you see the corporate sponsors start to pull their money, then we get things rolling. But
it is.
I think it was most recently in 2013 when Dan Snyder said, I can't remember who it was to the press, but said to use all caps, I will never change the name of this franchise. And like we're saying, maybe it wasn't so much of what changed over that 7 years, but what changed, of course, most recently. And then talking about what's actually going to affect what he wants is the money.
Money will change things. It's kind of what pushes a lot of these big leagues.
I know some people they get on it and it makes people uncomfortable. This kind of, as some people would say, like boycott, cancel culture, whatever it is. But part of the reason people pressure these big companies is, as we've seen, if you pressure Nike and this and that, those results happen. So I don't know. I think it's kind of reflective of why that happens. I mean, it works.
And if you
can put pressure on the right people, you can affect change.
And if we're talking about things like change, the name, excuse me for using it, the Redskins, if you look up what it's for, what the name was, it's not even just the color of the skin, it's actually something much more derogatory than that. And that's what we're kind of getting at the root at is, so many other teams are being called to change their names, and we're questioning the intent of the name and the derogatoriness of the name. Another one that people at least are calling of, having in this conversation, the Kansas City Chiefs, specifically, I feel like revolving around the tomahawk chop. Aaron, you are, of course, our Chiefs fans, our resident Chiefs fan. Is that something that you would like to see happen? Something that you feel is important for the team?
Yeah, I mean, if it targets a specific group in a derogatory way, then I'm all for changing a name. And I've seen a lot of polls out there recently, like, would you still be a Washington fan if their name is changed, which it has? Would you still be a Kansas City fan if they take away the name Chiefs? And like, your answer should obviously be yes if you're a real fan. The name doesn't make the team.
And
so
I think too, there's a way you can, like, I think of the Illinois Fighting Illini. I think you can honor specific things, and I think a Chief or a Brave, if it's done tastefully, can be okay. I think you just have to look at your sort of surrounding traditions, I guess, so to speak. Because speaking of Illinois, I know that they had a mascot who I believe was
Chief Wahoo.
Yeah, they had I think it was just a student and a very kind of like outlandish, a little over the top like mascot decoration.
Yes.
And they abandoned that part of it, but they cut the name. And you look at like obviously Florida State, and they have I think an agreement with the Seminole Nation. So I think as long as you're in touch with those communities and you can do it tastefully, I don't think all of those names like the Chiefs are necessarily inherently off limits. Maybe you would ask like, let's not do the chop, and the Braves are looking at that with baseball, or maybe you ask fans like, try not to come in this kind of over the top garb to the best you can. But I think as long as you're making an effort, I think it can be done.
I think that's what works with teams like Utah, the Utah Utes. That's a Native American tribe. The Central Michigan Chippewas, that's a Native American tribe. Florida State, obviously, the big one, the Seminole tribe, is as long as you take the culture and you explain it and you use that platform as something to
honor it.
Honor and share and, show people, hey, look at this history behind these people that we're representing with our logo, with our mascot. As long as you're doing it the right way and you're educating people on it and you truly are, Florida State, I know, takes steps to help the Seminole tribe and things like that. As long as you're doing that and you're not doing it in a derogatory manner, using a racial slur as the name of your team, I think it's a good thing to honor Native Americans as long as you do it the right way. You know what I mean?
To keep the traditionalism in it, there's no place for the word Redskins in any facet of society, but we're talking about the Seminoles, the Chippewas, Utes, a bunch of other schools. These universities are using it as a learning tool to honor and preserve that tradition. That's what it really should be about. So let's go into what some of the possibilities can be. Obviously, we're going to throw out some wild guesses right now. What do you want to see the Washington franchise name? I'm going to start with you, Ben.
What I want the name to be? Yeah. I've been a long lobby of the Pigskins. I think they're trying to keep the red in there, but Pigskins, they had the hogs back in the day. They can still be the skins. Yes. They already have those fans that dress up like hogs. The Pigskins.
That'd be a not even necessarily a rebranding, almost
just like leaning into that a little more.
Exactly. It wouldn't have to go too far.
A source not close to the situation, our own forecaster Jacob Sloan, says that he has heard rumors of the Warthogs. So same thing, but just not as nice.
I like it.
Red Tails, he mentioned
that's the one I like.
Which I like that. I don't remember.
It's for the Tuskegee Airmen.
Tuskegee,
yes.
I like the Red Tails. That's my pick right now.
Yeah, I was and they've also talked about rebranding. Obviously, the logo that they had. So if they want to steer away from something like the Braves or even a specific tribe, it seems like that might be the route that they're going to go.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
all right.
Want to get into some video game talk?
Yeah. All right. We've gone through all of the sad and depressing stuff we're going to talk about. Let's talk about EA Madden Football releasing their ratings. Most notably, we have some 99s on the board.
I think Mahomes paid for his.
You think? You don't think Mahomes
paid for it?
I mean, come on. Why wouldn't you with that new contract?
I hear what you're saying, but was he a 99 last year? Do you know,
think
Ben?
so. I mean,
at least towards the end of the year.
Towards the end of the year.
A source not close to the situation tells me he's pretty good.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Mahomes is all right.
Yeah.
So the one that jumps off to me, at least, I'll let you guys, go off about what you want to go off. I cannot believe that Aaron Rodgers is an 89 overall.
That blows my mind.
I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks of all time, maybe the most talented quarterback of all time, and a team that made almost the Super Bowl last year. Obviously, they ran into a buzzsaw in the San Francisco 49ers, but
that defense
a team that was down pretty much the whole year too. Nobody really gave the Packers much of a chance. And we're going to rate Aaron below 90?
Below 45-year-old?
I'd give you higher than 90, Aaron.
Thank you.
But, Aaron Rodgers. But, no, I'll be interested because I think Jake, like I said, I think you probably follow Madden a little more closely, certainly, than I. I feel like there has been, if you go back with these ratings, I used to play them every year, like 10 years ago. But now, I feel like there was a point in time when the ratings became way tougher. And like back in the day, like a Matt Hasselbeck on the Seahawks might have been an 88 overall. But now it's like to get into that 90 tier, like even McCaffrey's 99 overall, I think he has 92 speed, which is like pretty fast in the game.
I believe
back in the day, 92 speed, you're not a burner. In
Tyreek Hill's the only.
I was going to say, I believe he's the only 99 speed is
I
Tyreek Hill.
don't play Madden, nor am I a gamer in general. So can you kind of just break down what these ratings mean, maybe?
So yeah, the rating is
Overall.
basically your overall rating. It's how good you are perceived to be among your peers, and that's what they've done a lot recently. Is they're pinning people up head to head against each other. Like all the talk yesterday on Twitter is Tom Brady being in the 90 club, Aaron Rodgers being below the 90 club. So it's turned into a lot of almost like a competition type thing. Like how much faster am I than this guy? How much stronger am I than this guy? And then they pin them up against the other people in their skill groups.
And
Okay.
Yeah.
So in their
Am I right
segmentation-
about the ratings though? Did they get a lot tougher like
They
within
did.
the last 5 years?
Since-
I think
I would
2K
agree with
started
that.
it. 2K, like if you're an 80, like 80-ish in these old games, you're like kind of an okay player, like fine, but like maybe a second stringer. 80 in like 2K, you're like an all-star.
Yeah.
And then I think that's kind of gone over to Madden, where like 85, you're like wide receiver one
I
for
think
some fantasy teams.
what has happened is video games have become more realistic through the years. I mean, if you go back and play like Madden 03 with the Rams,
Oh, you can't
that
stop me
Rams
with
team.
Marshall Faulk.
Yeah,
I mean,
with
come
Marshall
on.
Faulk and Isaac Bruce and all those guys, you just torch everyone. It's not
Yeah.
even fun because everyone's a 98 overall. Like that team is just so good, it's impossible to lose. Where now they started to, I think it's become such a big business. There's so much money surrounding esports and everything anymore that you have to really, they have guys go out and they have like point assessors go out to practices and games and like re-rank guys through the season. Like it's become such a big business and it's become such a big thing that it's going to get more realistic and people are going to be harder on players, and I think that's kind of fun. I don't know. I like it. I like to
I
see
don't
it.
mind it.
One of my favorite segments from this previous season of Hard Knocks was Abrams, the safety, first-round draft pick of the Raiders, going up to the Madden rating saying, like, what are you doing? Like, my man coverage rating is so low. My speed is so low. And to see them take it personally, I just thought it was
funny.
funny.
I remember Byron Leftwich, from what I remember, was a big critic back in the day. They always had him at like 52 speed, and he never was happy about it.
I don't think he was very fast to begin with.
No, I mean, it was not. Do we want to look at some of these other ratings?
Oh yeah.
Aaron
I mean,
Rodgers, 89.
Any other? Watson at an 86 also jumps off the page to me a little bit.
I saw he was not happy.
I mean,
Deshaun
yeah, he
Watson.
wanted to be in the 90 club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson.
In 86, not even that close.
Yeah, no.
So I'm saying back in the day, that would have been like a slightly above average quarterback, and
Yeah.
now he's much better.
I mean, is he 2 overall points better than Dak?
I think so. I think
Dak
I,
in
I would-
84.
I don't get the
I
Dak
think
hype, but
personally a
that's
little
my-
bit more than just 2.
Yeah.
Where I see Zeke as a 92. Do we know where he was in relation to the other backs in the league?
Well, McCaffrey obviously the
number
99.
one.
McCaffrey and then Henry and then Zeke.
Yeah.
Okay.
See.
Derrick
Yeah.
Henry was a
Where's Derrick
93.
He's had such a good year.
Yeah. Derrick Henry was only a 93
Do
and
we
he
know
was the
where
number 2
Ryan
back.
Tannehill was? Shout out
God,
Big
they
Spring.
didn't release all of them. It's just
Well, yeah, I wanted to end it with the Mitch Trubisky rating.
Oh,
And
no,
then
yeah,
who's
that's-
do we have
better,
it?
Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky to start the season? Matt Nagy, we paying attention.
Wait, do we have the Mitch
But I guess
Trubisky rating?
I think they release them in a
in
overtime
tiers. Oh,
basically.
no,
You got to
that's
keep
not
buying
gonna
in.
be
It's like the
good.
NFL Top
Levels.
100 list, 10 at a time.
Honestly, the last Madden I have is Mitch Trubisky. I don't think Mitch Trubisky's even on that team, so I still just draft a new quarterback and start that new era all over.
Well, I got lucky. I got a Madden code from an employee of Barstool, Barstool Big Cat, hooked me up with a Madden code. So I've already been trying out the new read option with Lamar. Let's say his 99 speed is nothing to joke
I want to
about.
run that Heisman formation, him, RG3.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah. I haven't
Mark
checked if
Ingram.
they actually have that in the game, but they're very heavy in that multiple looks, different kind of option runs. It's good so far.
The Ravens are so fun. Oh my God,
They're gonna be a lot
that's
of
such
fun.
a fun team. All right, well.
Yeah, knock on wood, you guys, that we can have not even just more shows, but of course this football season that we've been teasing about, we all want it to happen. Of course, there's certain things we can do to potentially make it happen. We talked about wearing masks, talked about social distancing. And other than that, just wish the best for these local teams going out, and as well as some of these other bigger conferences making decisions for their student athletes and, of course, just their students.
Yep.
So
Stay healthy, West Texas.
stay healthy, West Texas. We'll join you in 2 weeks, I believe, for another edition of Final Score Overtime. But until then, enjoy this episode. Stay safe, everybody.